Tonight on The Conversation, we tackle the firestorm surrounding the appointment of Dennis Chung as Chief Technical Director of Jamaica's Financial Investigations Division. For some, it's a matter of merit. For others, it exposes deeper cracks in our governance model, from transparency and impartiality to political overreach. Joining me first, businessman and public commentator Donovan Wignal, and attorney and director at the National Integrity Action, Danielle. Later, we'll hear from Dr. Nadeen Spence, social commentator and member of the Constitutional Reform Committee. This is The Conversation. Stay with us. Lady, gentlemen, welcome to The Conversation. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm grateful. Thanks for having me.
Grateful. It's always a pleasure. So, there are a number of things that are happening now, especially with the recent developments, and we want to look primarily on the government and what the government calls a legitimate, transparent appointment, Dennis Chung's selection, and that came via the PSC. It was advertised, it was vetted, it was selected, and they have an explanation for it. We're going to go to that clip shortly so we can have your assessment of it, and then we can just get right into it.
Particular, the appointment of Mr. Dennis Chung as Chief Technical Director of the Financial Investigation Division, the FID, which has been resisted by the opposition PNP. The Jamaica Labour Party condemns as vulgar and inappropriate the action taken by the PNP in the vicinity of Hero Circle this morning in relation to the appointment of Dennis Chung as Chief Technical Director of FID. Let's examine some facts. Dennis Chung was appointed as Chief Technical Director of the FID following a process which was coordinated by the Public Services Commission, the PSC, which involved advertisement, interviews, and selection. The PSC was established many decades ago in order to ensure independent superintendence and coordination.
How should we understand that? How does the PSC process ensures transparency, independence in public appointments, and crucially, do you believe it worked in this particular case?
As for me?
I'll put it to you first.
Right. I think we have gone a little way ahead of the game by talking about the PSC. Let's start with what happens before it gets to the PSC. So there's a vacancy.
Yeah.
Before the PSC can make a selection, there has to be an application process, correct?
Yeah.
If there's an application process, people must know what they're applying for and what the qualifications are. If I'm correct on that, then the first procedure that we must look at is what was advertised. If it was advertised that you would have to have a particular set or particular standard, and up to, let's say in this instance, up to November of 2024, the advertisement for the position indicated that there would have been and would have to be a 12-year experience in investigations, 5 of which, or a portion of which, has to be at a senior level. The challenge we have is, if you're going to change those qualifications, when was it changed?
And why?
Why was it changed? Where was it communicated that it was so changed, so that people, us, individual citizens, can have confidence in the process? So we start at the process of the application, and those questions are there. When you get to the PSC, we don't know what's happening behind closed doors. We don't know who the persons are who are applying. And because we do not trust the process, and public trust is low, we are going to question whether or not it was done transparently, whether or not it was done in a manner that would facilitate some kind of advantage to those who have the power to control the narrative. And so before you get to the PSC, would you appreciate that the public is asking those questions? It's not, and then when it gets to the PSC, have you heard the PSC commenting? No. What you have heard are explanations coming from a political body, the Jamaica Labour Party, then you also have directly coming from the upper house, members from the upper house, the Senate, speaking about the issue. And by their very nature, this tells us that it is very political. It is in those circumstances that I'd like to change your question and indicate to you that what is most appropriate is not whether or not the PSC made the right selection, it's whether or not the procedure leading to the selection was correct.
So with that said, though, because we would have appreciated, or we can appreciate that in times past, there would have been directors who did not have a particular skill set in that, namely the idea of the law enforcement or the investigative background.
Could I pause there? You are familiar with the circumstances in which the person who had no law enforcement experience was there and why she actually left, and the recognition that the international standard is that persons who head such a division would have some kind of investigatory background. It is not so much having training in forensic accounting, but it is what you can bring to that particular position. So don't, and let's not do that.
Yeah.
Let's not do that. Let's not go back to what existed. Let's pretend for one moment that we are real.
Okay.
And in the real world, we have issues that are touching and concerning the FID.
What, though, are some of the inherent disadvantages now that we see? Because well, that leads to another question. But let's hear about the disadvantages that you foresee with what has happened now.
At the beginning, we are quite cognizant that the FID has been brought into the public discourse because of the investigations of the Integrity Commission.
Yeah.
And the recommendation from the Integrity Commission that we don't have the requisite skill set to complete this investigation, having gotten information from a forensic accountant. So we have sent it over to another division that, to our mind, has the skill set to do the investigations. So we all have heard about the FID.
Yeah.
Yes? Of particular concern to the public is whether or not the investigation into the Prime Minister is going to be transparent and fair. And so here is where the rubber hits the road. I will say publicly, as I have said in my press release, Dennis Chung was our former chairman of the board. That's the board of the National Integrity Action. He understands what I'm talking about when I say the perception. Having the highest regard to the work that he could possibly do. Ask yourself this, and this is the question I would ask to every Jamaican. Should Mr. Chung come back and say, I have done this work, here is the report, and these are my findings, and it vindicates the Prime Minister? How many of us will accept that report without more? Because of the circumstances that have surrounded his appointment. So, if he comes back and he says that he finds something, would we accept that too? So he's in a very difficult position. So
then the argument now is it has less to do with right and wrong. I'm just human for a minute. It's more about what the perception is. So irrespective of whether or not, based on the moment that we're currently in and what has happened before, you are saying that he's ineligible, not because of qualifications. It has nothing to do with the qualifications, but it's just the circumstances surrounding how he's where he is now.
Why would you say he's illegible?
Well,
because if your argument holds, which is that there is a qualifications that have now said he doesn't need those qualifications, we can't say he's ineligible.
No, so let's look at it from the perspective that, and based on what you have said. So, in other words, he's tainted, and that's the perception that is out there now. Yeah. So, irrespective of whatever findings he would come forward with at a future time, these will be questioned.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty much what we're driving at now. So, you know, we're saying that the process didn't work or has not worked in this case, or something has changed that should not have been changed, or it should have been communicated prior to.
Well, I mean, Danielle spoke about the process leading up to his appointment. I think the elephant in the room here is the public pronouncement that pronouncements that Mr. Chung, that Dennis would have made pertaining to the Prime Minister's situation with the Integrity Commission. Now, those public pronouncements, I think, would create a problem of doubt and trust with the public. And for that particular reason, as far as trust is concerned, as far as the public perception of the appointment is concerned, as far as the outcome of any investigation that he does, that proved to vindicate the Prime Minister, it would cause doubt. I'll draw from another analogy. If, for example, you were choosing a jury, a jury that would be adjudicating on the particular case with the Prime Minister, would Dennis Chung be a suitable juror to adjudicate on that particular case?
Yeah.
And if the answer is no, then why no? Because of his public pronouncement on the Prime Minister's situation.
Yeah.
So for that particular reason, I think we have a conundrum having Dennis in the particular post. It has nothing to do with qualifications. It has nothing to do with Dennis's antecedents. He has worked other places and has done very well. But because of the optics surrounding this particular situation,
don't look good.
It does not look good.
So Kwame, so you join both. You join the situation that has been presented in terms of how it's been advertised, how it appears that he is selected. It's predetermined, and it's predetermined because he has the ear of the Prime Minister. Marry that with his public utterances and appreciate that those utterances indicated that he was providing a technical view. Yes, because he was in his capacity as an accountant, he's able to speak to bank accounts, he's able to speak to the quality of a report. Now, if you form that view already, are you going to be in a position
to be objective?
To be objective. And because this matter is of public importance, and I want to make it very clear, this is the public importance that we're talking about. And when we talk about public perception and the use of authority, that is where everything comes into play in this particular matter.
So before we get to the break, though, does this particular controversy point to a deeper crisis then in governance?
I'd say yes.
It does.
Because if it is that you're going to perform a particular action, and as far as that action is concerned, it would hit trust. It would, cause public trust to be shaken. Then you should really examine your choices.
Oh, so then is it more so about one appointment, or are we witnessing the slow centralization of what we can call executive power then?
Some of us would call it evidence of an authoritarianism. And there are other examples that persons would want to be able to point at to indicate that as far as the creation and application of our Constitution is in the Westminster model, it offers too much authority to the Prime Minister. And given the level of authority that the Prime Minister has because of the very nature of the system of governance that we inherited, it makes every reason that when we speak about constitutional reform, that constitutional reform is not done for aesthetic purposes. It is done to see and answer questions such as, is there a greater public participation? How can we encourage people to participate in governance? How do we appreciate and allow people to appreciate their involvement in governance that is more than a vote?
So then should we seek to introduce then formal public hearings for major appointments to reduce, such as this, to reduce protest and to somehow build trust or rebuild trust?
That's a very good idea. I yield to Mr. Wignal.
I think a lot of the appointments, you would admit, they are subjective appointments. People are going to choose who they think will give them an advantage. And if allowed to, they will. And as far as our Jamaican situation is concerned, over the years, the public perception is that that is what is happening. How do we change that? Probably what you suggested about, public consultation might be a route.
I hear you burning. A penny for your thoughts.
Pennies are no longer of much value. They no longer exist in some places. You see, I do not think, with the greatest of respect, that merely having public hearings or consultations are the answer. If you look at the current situation with our job description and code of conduct situation, you were told that there were consultations.
Yeah.
If you look at constitutional reform, you were told that there were consultations. So consultations, I think, can be controlled. What we really need to do, Kwame, is to have a hard look at the sections of our governance that requires greater public participation and how we can improve public trust in those areas. And this wouldn't require, to be fair, in this instance, I don't think it requires a public hearing. What it required was communication as to why it is that you'd have changed the qualifications, communication as to why it is, who the other applicants were, and I'll tell you this, perhaps it wasn't best to have the senators themselves speak on the issue. Perhaps it wasn't best to have the Minister of Finance speak on the issue. And perhaps it's a question of timing. We are on the skirts of an election. Perhaps it would have been reasonable if you were to read the tea leaves to let some things wait until after the election so that it doesn't give the appearance that you're trying to control the narrative.
If it is that we weren't having an election,
Then.
if it is that the Prime Minister didn't find himself in this particular conundrum, there would have been no issue having Dennis Chung in the position.
Save and accept that we need to look at the qualifications and decide when we talk about having a strong investigative regime, if it was reasonable to remove the qualifications to have someone who has 12 years of experience in the investigation world.
A lot to consider. A sharp and necessary start. When we return, we take a closer look at what the man at the center of it all, Dennis Chung, has to do and whether his qualifications meet the moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Dennis Chung is no stranger to finance, with roles at the Bank of Jamaica, across administrations and in the private sector. But critics say that's not enough for the head of the FID. Take a look.
Organization of Jamaica that Mr. Chung is a suitable candidate for the post. In fact, the words "a great selection" were used. Well-known attorney at law and public affairs commentator Mr. Gordon Robinson is right when he opined that Dennis Chung is as qualified to be FID Chief Technical Director as anybody else. Suggestion that Mr. Chung lacks the qualification for the post lacks merit. It must be noted, I have not heard this in the media, but it must be noted that at least 5 individuals who have served either in a permanent capacity or acting the top job at the FID have not a direct law enforcement qualification. In fact, like Mr. Chung, 2 of those individuals have credentials in accounting at the level of a master's degree. One had qualification in business administration and economics. One is an attorney at law with a master's in business administration, and the other had qualifications in ICT.
Do we need law enforcement experience for this particular post, or could you say that financial and administrative skills, meet the brief?
Do you get more vitamin C from an orange than you get from a lime?
Depends on the size.
Depends on the size. Also depends on the flavor you want, right? Oranges are sweeter than limes, but we still get vitamin C, right? The question is, which is what is suitable for what moment? I am at that juncture where I would respond to the position which says he is qualified.
But
I would not use a but. I would say at this particular moment in time, having regard to the allegations that have been set forth that are to be investigated, the lack of confidence that persons have in the government as it relates to investigations, and I am going to say it, of illicit enrichment to involving members of parliament, which has never occurred before in our history of Jamaica, that the public needs to have confidence that there is going to be a thorough, fair investigation into what the allegations have been made out. And in these circumstances, you could have put anyone in that position. But the question is going to be asked of someone like Mr. Chung, who has publicly indicated his position as it regards to the report, as to whether or not there is public confidence in what he's going to do. That's one. And 2, if you did not need qualifications of law enforcement, why would you have advertised them in 2024? And if they were removed, why have you not been forthcoming to the public to say, we removed it? Because. And further, if you are so confident that he is the best of all applicants, because you'll agree with me that you can have 10 persons applying for Rhodes Scholars and their applications are extraordinary, but there's always one that stands out. Of all the applications in this particular moment, that he was the applicant for the time such as this that was best suited to direct, to lead, and to present the image of transparency, objectivity, and public confidence in an entity that is now charged with investigating the investigation report of the Prime Minister, whose overarching powers are of such that they stretch to the extent that every single member of his political party will defend him. And there is none that is going to come out and say, it don't look good. I'm just saying, So it's not a question of whether he can do the job. It's a question of whether his appointment is going to inspire public confidence, given the fact that we are at a position that we have never experienced before.
Well, I mean, she said it. The whole subjectivity of his appointment, and the question is, will he be able to be objective in the dispensation of his duties as it relates to the Prime Minister's investigation? He's going to be, quote unquote, managing that particular arm of law enforcement. Qualifications aside, and I'm going to go there again, is public pronouncement on the happenings leading up to this point pertaining to the Prime Minister's statutory declaration would beg of the question, you know, how would you adjudicate on the Prime Minister's case?
So how much weight, though, how much weight should endorsements from groups such as the PSOG and prominent lawyers, you know, carry? You know, that's one of the questions. Do they bolster trust, or, you know, would they raise red flags?
I want you to notice something, that all the endorsements you would have gotten, they endorsed his qualifications. So as far as qualifications are concerned, as far as his abilities to manage an organization is concerned, he would have had the full confidence of those people. He was at the PSOJ, which he did a phenomenal job. I think I was there briefly with him. He was at several other places, including NIA.
Yes, yeah. And he was a fantastic board chair.
Exactly. So there's no doubt as to whether or not he has the ability to manage. But where the doubt is his ability to be objective in the dispensation of his duties pertaining to the live investigation of the Prime Minister's financials.
Look, it's all also about appearances, you know.
Yeah.
Let's be reasonable. Nobody's questioning his qualifications. People are looking at his pronouncements. People are looking at the fact that he has an heir to the Prime Minister. And one of the things I think we are not asking ourselves, who does the FID director report to?
Good question.
Ministry of Finance?
Or the Commissioner and the Minister of National Security.
I'm just making a point here.
Yeah.
Hold on. Just walk with me down this road. Who does he report to? Does the Minister of Finance, does he have anything to do? Is there a channel of communication to the Ministry of Finance?
It would appear.
If there is a channel to the Ministry of Finance, who does the Ministry of Finance report to?
The Prime Minister.
PM.
All right. Let's shift it again. When you put someone in the position of FID chair, where we talk about investigations, is he someone that can generate confidence from the investigators who are going to be working with him in that particular position? Is his connection to the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister of such that those who are doing investigations may become fearful of doing that which they're supposed to do or saying what they have to say in a meeting because they don't want a name to reach that particular location?
Yeah.
I'm just saying. And so when you talk about that, we have to be real and appreciate that people want confidence in the position. That's all they're asking for.
So we have understood from pronouncements here as well as other places that the role, or the requirements rather, they have been changed. You know, as well, that was in November, late November, early December. Now, could we argue, or you think that there might be some argument in existence that states that the role was rightfully redefined, you know, to meet new demands?
What new demands, though? It's a law enforcement
That's for the Prime
agency.
Minister, and that's for them to answer, though.
What are the new demands? And let's be real, in the international community, everybody will tell you, just do a Google search.
Let's Google it.
Let's Google it. When you Google it and you
GPT.
look to see what the qualifications are, if you want to establish a strong foundation, the investigations come in. An attorney who has a particular background, investigations background, does it mean that any attorney can become director of public prosecutions?
No.
No.
They are qualified. Particularly an attorney who is in the courts, they do criminal matters, they've done so for the last 20 years. Are they qualified to become DPP? You might have 20 applications. but there's still one that stands out. And then you look at timing. Timing is everything.
So would it be proper to ask who were the other applicants and what caused them not to be chosen?
Well, if you're inspiring public trust, you'd want to share who the applicants were. And if you're inspiring public trust, you want to say, when did you change it? Because you might have a good reason. And I'm happy you raised that. Because there may have been a good reason. There might have been several applications that have been put in and nobody came out. And so we reworked it. Going back to the past doesn't help us. And as Jamaicans, we have to accept that we don't drive looking into our rearview mirror.
Yeah.
We get where we're going by facing forward. So this constant decision of saying, we had 5 people who used to have that. People who used to use typewriter don't survive now if you don't know how to use a smartphone. Things and times change. So we must meet the challenges of our new reality. And so the question is, do these qualifications give confidence in our system? Do these qualifications give confidence to the Jamaican people in the context of which we are operating? Does this appointment strengthen the political view that there is, in fact, commitment to anti-corruption, commitment to ensuring that there are no parliamentarians who are even covered by the spectre of illicit enrichment? And will they be investigated? Remember, that's a problem that people are having with corruption, Let me bring it home to what is close to NIA. Ask any Jamaican, what's your greatest problem with corruption in Jamaica? There has never been a politician who's been called to book. There's never been the capture of the big fish.
So then, following along your vein, then it seems to me that the impression that is being painted that when we don't put the right structures in place and then individuals go, then somehow the politicians are pretty much just creating new avenues to protect themselves.
Absolutely.
So that they will never ever be brought to books.
Well, you see, that's the problem that we're having with the current system and the current regime. We're asking the persons who are beneficiaries of the system
to fix it.
To fix it. And they're not going to fix it because they're the ones who benefit from the Westminster model.
Is there a better way, though, for us to get the system fixed without asking those who are at the head of the system to fix it? Is there a better way?
The best way is what we do now. You eat an elephant one bite at a time. Education. Public education, because I'll tell you this much, the better way is for the public to start asking for greater accountability. And it's not just civil society. When people define civil society as JAMP or NIA, we are just remnants of civil society. There are several groups. The challenge is that many people are afraid to talk.
Or they don't know the right questions to ask.
Or them just afraid to talk, because they're afraid to ask. Asking questions means they have to talk. And they perhaps don't know where they can go to talk, and the information is not being presented to them, and the avenues where they can get this information is not there. But you see, once you start educating people about civics, when you start asking people to understand that as a politician, there are 7 things that you should know about: objectivity, transparency, integrity, and honesty, and start demanding this of your politicians and start allowing them to become accountable, whether it is at the ballot or by making sure that as communities, we no longer just demonstrate, but we participate in putting forward petitions, clamoring for what we want and what we think is right. They have to answer. And they're not going to change the system, Kwame. It has to be coming from us as a people in the different groups, brownies, the groups that you represent, who become active.
So follow me now, both of us, both of you. What if, and this is just a big what if our politicians are but a microcosm of Jamaica, and what if we are afraid to hold them accountable because the possibility exists that we will now have to hold ourselves
That's not
accountable?
a what if. That is exactly what happens now. Because when you do and look at the Don Anderson poll that says over 90% of Jamaicans believe that corruption is a way of life. And we understand that we benefit from nepotism. How you get to work? I got call Donovan because he must know somebody down in one of them business places where I can get one lawyer at work. Hold me true. Yes? Or cronyism. Me know Kwame down at CTV and me know say he go call me and tell me when they have a vacancy. Because we benefit from friends, we benefit from family, we benefit from hand go packy come.
Links,
hand go packy come because we know something. All of us have that experience.
What if you're qualified?
Even if you're qualified.
Yeah, you still have to.
You still have to.
Yeah.
So you are perfectly right. How we start this change is for us to ask ourselves, Are we satisfied with what is happening?
Or
and
am
I prepared to make that change? And I'm grateful you brought it up. Because less than an hour ago, that was the precise conversation I was having. I indicated that change will never come, Kwame, until as a people and as Jamaicans, we accept what we want to see. So if politicians, we perceive politicians to be corrupt, and we have no issues with politicians putting their friends in positions and politicians using their powers to get more assets, and we don't have a problem with that because scamming mentality is really large and in charge, then that's fine. That's the Jamaica that we want. And people like Danielle and Jeanette are just spitting in the air because people really don't want to change, because at the end of the day, you are right. They don't want to acknowledge that they are part of the problem. And I agree with you. So it's not a big what if. What happens now is, have we accepted that we are part of the problem and we're now willing to be the change? And if we're willing to be the change, we can't limit ourselves to how we're going to change it. We have to start changing it in our spaces and asking, because politicians represent us. They come from us, you know. I feel we family then come from, you know, them are my family, my friend, my family, my uncle, my cousin. All the way. Then I just grow up overnight. I know weed. So if you accept that they come from us and they represent us, it must be that they are talking about the things and the elements and the values that we hold true. If they are not people who are holding our values, why are you supporting them? Just asking for a friend.
For a friend. So Donovan, let me throw this one out to you. In the past, we have seen that the Andrew Holness administration has been defined as being poor communicators. You know, could this be one of those instances where A, they have not been able to communicate properly, or B, they have not communicated full stop, or C, they just can't bother? And so the changes have been made, and we're expected to just take it and just run with it.
Yeah, I think what has happened in the past is that a couple of things happened, and it wasn't checked. It was allowed to happen. So in this particular scenario, we are in election season. So both political parties are out there on the hustings. This particular issue with the Prime Minister's situation is seen as a weakness by the opposition. And the fact is, if the Prime Minister was in opposition, if they were in opposition and this happened, it would have been the same thing.
Yeah.
True that.
So it is pure politics at this point, right? But there is a teaching moment, I think. At the end of the day, a lot of questions are being asked, and people are demanding answers. And of course, there are going to be answers that are tainted by politics. And there are going to be the people, I would consider me one of the people who are centrists. I'm here, we need the thing to be run and run properly. If it's going to be done, it needs to look good.
Yeah.
And this particular matter, as far as the optics of it is concerned, it does not...
It's too much of a question.
Yeah, it leaves a lot to, you know, it is questionable. So what I think at the end of the day is going to happen, and I don't think it's going to be a 9-day wonder, but I think post the election, I have to look, because the election is in the year, it's near.
Yeah, it's near.
There's not a lot that is going to happen outside of this. If the opposition is still in opposition after the election, they'll still be asking the questions about the Prime Minister's declarations and how the investigation is going at FID. If it is that the government changes hands, then of course we know what's going to happen. Right? So it's almost like musical chairs as far as the politics is concerned. But right now, with the current environment that we're in, you take a seat and get some popcorn.
You know, let me start by taking this. We're going into we're going into a break now, and I love the insights. Yay. You know, Danielle Arsha, thank you very much. You know, for your thoughtful contributions. So after the break, though, Dr. Nadeen Spence joins us for another part of this particular conversation. Mr. Wignal will be staying. I look forward to speaking with you again.
Always a pleasure.
She has said a mouthful.
Always.
You know, and
is there a box outside? Is there security?
No. So Whoa.
It's nighttime, right?
Yeah, so let me just turn to you and say,
serious
you know,
insight,
continue
though.
staying with us. The conversation continues. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Back to the conversation. Dr. Nadeen Spence, social commentator and member of the Constitutional Reform Committee, now joins us. Dr. Spence, welcome. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So there have been a lot of things circulating in the media and beyond. And one of the questions that immediately comes to mind is, should any government, regardless of the party, ever intervene in a PSC appointment?
It's not should, it's can. Remember the Public Services Commission and the work that it does is protected by the Constitution. So the PSC is a creature of the Constitution, and so when someone is appointed through the Public Service Commission, the appointment usually comes from the Governor General, signifying that it is expected that this appointment stands above the political fray, right? So the process is one that is expected in the appointment of key people in the public sector, is one that is expected to stand outside of the political to and fro.
So
right?
we're talking about now, as in that's what
Yes,
obtains now, or when the Constitution changed?
No, this is what obtains now. So a part of the constitutional reform process that we have been engaging in, and we talked about a phased process, that phase 3 is about reforming the public sector. Because remember now, the public sector, in terms of the civil servants, are led not by the ministers of government, those people who sit in the ministry who provide policy and legislative direction. It's headed by the permanent secretary who provides the technical day-to-day leadership and the execution of the work of the government through the permanent secretary. So even if you go in some ministries, it's not the minister who has the power to tell the people in the ministry what to do from day to day. It's the permanent secretary. So our constitution sets out the role of certain key positions in not in government, in our public service, and for that reason, our public service, according to our constitution, is an independent body. Hence, the Public Service Commission is a body that is independent of the to and fro of government and opposition.
It's supposed to be independent.
Yeah, but
right.
I mean, part of what we are taught, we have to understand though, that there is always going to be a kind of thinking through, like, you know, is there influence, isn't there influence? And there might be, I'm not saying there isn't, because of how people are and how, you know, people interfacing with institutions.
So it's not because there is an inherent flaw in the system.
No.
It's just because of people.
It's just that there might be situations where people do not respect the constitutional arrangements that we have. Now, I'm not saying this is the case, but I'm saying I hear this call for constitutional reform. And yes, constitutional reform is needed because we have had issues with matters related. Some people say you can't get rid of people out of the public service. It's hard for you to fire them because security of tenure is guaranteed. And And so we've talked about how do we make our public sector more efficient and more accountable in respect of holding those who work in it more efficient and accountable. But we have to understand how it works before we ask for some of the reform we're currently asking for.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the current situation surrounding the appointment of Dennis Chung, the optics of it, you know, how it seems to the public is that there was some influence leveled to have Mr. Chung in this particular position, because the perception is that it would present some kind of advantage to the Prime Minister with him being there based on his...
or the ruling party.
Right. Based on, you know, some of his pronouncement that he would have made pertaining to the Prime Minister's Integrity Commission report and the subsequent referral to the FID for...
So can I comment on that? No, I had, you know, when you hear, I've been listening to the comments. I went back to hear the comments that Chung made. And you have to, what I ask myself is, would it be unusual for somebody with his history, with his background, with his training, to have made that comment? In other words, was he making that comment from an uninformed place, or was he making that comment
in a technical
way? And what I heard from the comment he made was, there's nothing unusual with somebody having 28 bank accounts.
Yeah.
What would be unusual is to look at the activities within those 28 accounts. Is that something that a chartered accountant, someone with his training and his experience would say? Is that a comment that he would make? And was he by that excusing any kind of misbehavior, if there was seen to be misbehavior by the Prime Minister in respect of his statutory declaration? Was he excusing it, or was he engaging in an analysis, having been asked a question, par for the course? That's a question, I think, that is it reasonable for him to have made those statements?
Well, I see Donovan wants to
but
chime
in the current political environment, and Nadeen, we're in a high politics season now. And, during the lead up to what I suspect will be a very soon election, there would have been questions surrounding the perceived weakness of the Prime Minister's situation with his integrity declarations. And the fact that he would have asked Mr. Chung and Mr. Chung's comment, in support of the Prime Minister, and then leading up to the point now where he's subsequently appointed to the body that is going to be investigating the Prime Minister's declaration. As far as the public optics of it is concerned, and the fact that we're highly political right now,
timing is off.
Yeah, the timing is very off. And if it was a situation where, for example, the government appointed an expatriate in that post, there would be nothing to see here, moving right along.
No, understood, but in this case he appointed Dennis Chung, and the question is, this is the question that I still ask. The comments that what we're saying, we've taken some dangerous leaps in this. We've concluded on some things, and we have decided that this is the case, right? So Dennis Chung, who is a chartered accountant,
has made some statements, some public comments
in
the past, because
he was asked a question. He answered based on his training.
And it was sensitive. It was deemed as being sensitive.
No. It wasn't sensitive. He was the issues are in the public domain.
Yeah, man.
As people like me and you are wont to do, we, based on our experience, based on our analysis, we proffered a position. The position wasn't one on the Prime Minister. The position was on a matter related to the number of accounts that an individual has. And if you remember his comments were precisely, it's not unusual for someone to have 28 bank accounts, and he laid out the circumstances. Very technical knowledge. I wouldn't have been able to make those statements that he made because me not have that training. Yeah? But the matter of the Prime Minister's supposed 28 accounts was a matter that was in the public domain, and a number of people
he gave a public comment.
And he gave a comment
public matter.
on a public matter.
So Donovan, with that said now, should that disqualify him from a role that requires political neutrality and public trust?
Absolutely not.
So here's a question, Here's a question, and that's the question for the public as well. Should this disqualify him, speaking of Dennis Chung, from a role that requires political neutrality as well as public trust? We're leaning towards public trust based on what we have been talking about so far. Should it?
So I'm going to go back to optics again. And where we are in our current electoral cycle, and those comments that would have seemed to be in support of the Prime Minister's situation would have been perceived by the public as Mr. Chung speaking in support of the Prime Minister with his conundrum.
No, but
you understand? So,
that statement, though, was not in the public. The opposition had a press conference and located that argument in the public.
So is it a misappropriation then, as in
the opposition had a press conference and said, and we have since learned that the report from the Integrity Commission did not say that. Did not say that the Prime Minister had 28 accounts. There was a lot of, there are misunderstandings. We need to go back and read that report and clarify that for ourselves, right?
Right. So
let me just make this point now.
So our favorite station did go through those reports from cover to cover. No.
It's not our favorite station. I heard it from, though. I engaged that information. But just saying, continue.
Right. But when you listen to the narratives, the public narratives, the public comments, the veranda talk, and, you know, when you speak to people in general, you know, you hear, well, I saw the thing set. Now the man, you know, Mr. Chung was placed here to give, you know, it looked like he was placed here to give the Prime Minister some coverage, etc., etc.
So we're talking about perception now.
Right. So perception and trust is what we're talking about. And if it is that, and I'll say this again, if it was 6 months down the road that this happened,
it would not have mattered.
And I'll say this again, if it was the opposition on the other side of the fence, I think
as has happened.
Right. They would have done the same exact thing. So I said, in politics and in war, sometimes you can say all is fair. But what is happening is that we're seeing this particular matter obviously being turned into a political football.
So we're seeing the protests, you know, that's not the issue. We're seeing the protests, and one of the questions that come to mind immediately is whether or not these are legitimate expressions, you know, of the democratic accountability.
I mean, since this thing has evolved, I've heard that we're in a constitutional crisis, we're in a governance crisis. Sorry. And I've been looking at countries that are said to be in governance or constitutional crisis, like the U.S. is in a governance crisis.
No, they're in a constitutional crisis.
And a constitutional crisis. Are we near there? Are we operating that way? So what is it that is causing people in civil society to speak about Jamaica in the way they're speaking about it? And we also, those of us who are a part of the creation of the narratives, have to recognize that a narrative is created, you know, by a perspective and a position, and people operating from a particular position. You get what I mean? Where I come from, in the field that I study and I have my PhD in, we refuse to have people talk without them telling us where do you come from? What is the perspective that has shaped your opinion? Because the perspective that has shaped your opinion is what is going to lead you to draw the conclusions that you are now drawing. And my perspective might be very different because I don't come from the position that you come from. So when we're saying that is out there, and there are some people in the public who hold that perspective, but there are other people who don't, because our positionality is different. And so we have to know, and that's why I said to you, even this matter of the 28 bank books, the opposition had a press conference and put that out there in the public. Other people do not say the same thing. So if it is that you're in media, you have to be careful that we do not see the idea of the 28 bank books as the position that came out of the Bible, and we shouldn't question because it is the truth. Because it might not necessarily be the only perspective on that report and how that matter is presented.
So as we ease into the break, though, is there a real risk, given the whole things, you know? Is there a risk that we're going to drag professional appointments in the political mud now, based on what we have just seen or heard?
That's what we are doing by dragging the Public Services Commission into this discussion in the way we have. What we are doing is kind of messing up a properly constituted body in a way that we have never done in Jamaica.
I beg to differ.
You beg to differ. I want you to hold that point until we come back. It's important. Context and crucial questions. When we return, we'll broaden the lens and ask what's at stake for Jamaica on the global stage. We'll be right back in a moment. Welcome back to the conversation. So now to the wider picture. Critics say that perceived partisanship in key appointments could hurt Jamaica's international standing. So we're going to be looking at that for a second. But just before that, though, we want you to tell us, what were you going to say before the break?
No, there was a...
You beg to differ.
Right. What was the last comment you made?
So
I say, yeah,
there's a risk. There's a risk that we will drag these professional appointments in the political mud.
I was about to say, it is a teaching moment for us, a teaching moment for the country. I see a situation where for every single experience on the political postings, we learn as a country what to do, what not to do, and in a lot of cases, how we should do things. If it is that this particular situation happened 10 months ago, happened 6 months from now, it would have been, and you know, nothing to see here moving right along, as I said before.
And if it was an expatriate, is the same statement that you'd have made?
Exactly, if it was an expatriate. But because of the political situation that we are in now, we cannot escape it. As far as the Public Services Commission is concerned, we have not heard from the Public Services Commission. They have not come out and said anything.
They never do.
But what I'm saying is, who were the other applicants? And good questions. Who were the other applicants? Why was the...
But that's not
the
something
requirements
that you're
changed?
necessarily going to share in the public.
Yeah, but because of the public perception now, to allay those concerns, so to speak.
But is that their job, though?
I've never heard I've never heard the PSC speak publicly before.
They've not.
And if they spoke, would they do a lot to answer some of the questions that are being asked now? And that I think, you know, hearing from them and not from the body politic would go a far way in really quieting down some of the noise that we're currently hearing around this particular issue.
But also part of what we should know is how it works. And I'm not here saying I know how it works. I'm just saying to myself, I perhaps need to go back to the Constitution and get a deeper look at how the Public Services Commission work and how the Public Services Commission and the public service have deliberately in Jamaica stayed out of quarrels like this because there is a fear that if the public service becomes embroiled in this kind of milieu, then the trust that it is supposed to enjoy because of its location in our constitution and out of the political partisanship would perhaps begin to fray. That doesn't mean that it is a perfect institution, but it does mean that what we need is for more. It's supposed to be above the fray, the political fray.
Who's the head of the public service? No, not the commission. Just Jamaica Public Service. Is it the cabinet? No. Is it the cabinet secretary? General?
It's the governor general. The governor general is in a way because the governor general makes the official appointments, but it's not the governor general. So I don't know enough to comment on it.
In the same way, then that particular office typically is neutral, is politically neutral, and it is above reproach. Isn't that the same expectation that is being given of the PSC and other bodies like that there should be beyond? Because one of the questions that comes to mind immediately is whether or not this controversy puts Jamaica at odds with watchdog bodies like Financial Task Force or any one of those.
No, I don't think so. I think those who are observing from abroad are well aware of the internal conversations that are propelling this question that we are now seeking to answer. People know and are perhaps being briefed by several different bodies as to what is happening. So I think that specter of, the international public is going to come down on you.
It's unfounded.
Yeah.
I beg to differ a little bit. I think in situations like these, those bodies, I think, will go for further analysis. And like I said, the optics, how it looks, you know, the type of impression it gives those organizations, the type of impression it gives the public. Of course, you know, the public is split 50-50 now, but a great deal of the population would have a question sign over the appointment. Not even question sign so much about Dennis's qualification, because he's
Yeah, I think we have established that the issue isn't about qualifications, but optics.
The question sign is about, you know, why would he be chosen for that particular position at this particular point in time? And if you can't find a reasonable answer, then people are going to come up with their own answers. If you're on one side, you'll come up with one, and if you're on the other side,
the answer that he's qualified wouldn't suffice.
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Why?
Because
he made a statement about the 28.
No, not because he made a statement. But the fact of the matter is, the perception is that
he's tainted.
Far from tainted. But he has the ears of the Prime Minister.
So he's unable to be fully objective.
So outside of this particular moment and that appointment, the perception that he has the ears of the Prime Minister. So what if it was the other way around, the opposition? He used to work at Daring, Bunting and Gold. How would that play out? Because I would say, you know, somebody might say he used to work at that bank.
Nadeen?
That was at once the bank, the Prime Minister's bank, if it was the other way around.
I'll tell you the honest truth.
Would it be the same thing?
It would be absolutely the same thing. Let me tell you something.
Okay.
If come, and some people say God forbid, and some people won't, but if come June, July, August, September, whenever the election is held, and we have a similar situation where the ruling party finds themselves in a similar conundrum, and appointments are done just like this, I am sure the opposition, whoever it is, will be bawling bloody murder.
We are making an assumption that the appointment process was tainted. What you're saying is that this constitutional body called the Public Services Commission, which operates outside of the political parties and fray, has been corrupted.
And that is the impression.
That is the conclusion that you're drawing in.
And no, not
and
me.
I'm saying that we have to be people draw that conclusion because those of us in the public have muddied the waters around the Public Services Commission and haven't made that distinction about the Public Services Commission being required by the Constitution to act above the political fray.
So I'll ask another question, because I'm looking at it from the perspective that the possibility exists that not much has been done to communicate or educate rather the public regarding the role of the PSC and other bodies like it, and the fact that they are required to act in a particular way. So because of that, no, it's not difficult for me or Tom Jones or anybody to just muddy the water on any one of these appointments.
And
so
I think that is what is happening.
Bigger issue.
I think a lot of people who are making comments in the public don't know, and those who know are deliberately seeking to muddy the waters.
To get, of course, political advantage. And the sad thing about it that we're only seeing political responses. And what we probably need to see is the information on how the PSC operates, and probably some more transparency on how the process went to appoint Dennis. At the end of the day, the more information shared is a less likelihood of people coming up with their own answers. Right.
So
no,
with that said, then
the people who are leading the public perception, you know, they know. Let us be clear on that.
So I'll throw this over to you, Nadeen. You know, what are some of those reforms that could help to safeguard transparency and to restore public trust, you know, without compromising the speed of governance? Because speed is important. Well, we've been looking at timing for quite some time. So what are some of those reforms that we could implement that would help to safeguard and restore public trust without affecting negatively the speed of governance?
I think one of the things that has to happen is that we need a lot more information out there about how our government, how the state works. Let's not say government, how the state works. Because when we say government, people tend to think about the party in power. But the government is the government regardless of which party in power. You know? Yeah? So we need more information about how the state called Jamaica works. Yeah, because the state called Jamaica is not necessarily the political party in power. The state continues regardless of who comes into power.
Yeah.
That's why sometimes a lot of parliamentarians or politicians go into office and they get frustrated, you know, because it's not easy to move the Jamaican state. It is there regardless, and sometimes they go in and they have to conform to the state because the state, the engine called the state is there. And we have to tell people that, we have to get people to understand that there's a state called Jamaica and governments might change from time to time, but the state continues, right? So we need more information about how our institutions work, not how our government necessarily works, perhaps how our government works within the context of the state, but we need to understand our state and recognize that in this country called Jamaica, we've built solid institutions, and that because we do not trust our politicians, it doesn't mean that we do not have honorable people who lead the state organs, that they're Jamaicans just like me and you, and some of them live in our homes and we know them and they're honorable people and they do a good job. And we might quarrel about efficiencies and the speed of work, but it doesn't necessarily mean that all of us are pilfering the nation's resources.
Well, I mean,
you look puzzled. You're not sure how to answer that question.
As far as the state is concerned, as far as the actors at the different level in the state is concerned, people are going to act in their own interest at all times. And it is something that it's probably just nature. And that particular saying holds true with this particular appointment. The public perception of it.
What holds true in terms of the appointment?
That people act in their own best interest at all times. So
No, not at all times.
most times.
That's a cynical
Why are you
view.
asking now? Because inherent in your statement, it would be as though this appointment was based on a particular assumption that this individual might offer some amount of advantage.
Let's take it home a little bit,
you
Kwame.
know.
If I were the Prime Minister and that particular position was open, do you think that I wouldn't probably try and have somebody there that probably might give me some coverage?
But based on what Nadeen is saying, it's out of his hands.
Yeah.
At Jamaica will live.
Yeah, but that is what I'm saying. If we take it to that.
I am saying to you, as a human being, Jamaican, living in Jamaica.
With links.
Yeah, with links. Right? Let's take it home a little bit. Unhypocritical. And that particular situation, I'm in a particular situation, and having a particular person in a place that can give me some coverage, you don't think I would try my best to make it happen?
Yeah, yeah.
No, if you're honest with yourself, and it's just nature, it's survival. It's sometimes it works out to be political survival, and politics sometimes can be a very nasty, creature. So in this particular instance, looking at it from the human side, if it is that the appointment was to provide coverage, then it is what it is.
And that if, you say, if it is.
If it is.
If it is, because remember this position was advertised from when, last year, November, and there was no take-up.
December.
It has been out for a while and there was no take-up, right? And then they had to go again to get the position. So that the position has been vacant for a while. Is also a part of what we know.
And the communication again is a problem. If the position was vacant from last November, whatever situation concerning the Prime Minister existed long before November.
So there shouldn't be any rush to...
Is there a rush?
Is
there a rush?
All right, so what I'm saying to you is, there should be no rush.
I'm asking if there's a rush.
So why no?
And a rush in relation to what?
That's what I'm saying. It's poor timing.
I'm asking, is there a rush and a rush in relation to what?
Extremely poor timing.
The timing.
Look at the risk.
The timing of the Public Services Commission is not the timing of the political.
Look at the reasoning now.
So what he's pointing us to, is that, all right, so since last year, the appointment has been there, as in the vacancy has been there, it has been open, and no one has taken up the opportunity. Fast forward, now we are in June, and elections are due in September.
But then that is what I'm saying. If you understand how the Public Services Commission works, you will know that the Public Services Commission's timeline and calendar is not the political timeline and agenda.
And I'm agreeing with you, but hold on.
You understand? It's not
you just said a while ago, Nadeen, that
like
this is a constitutional body. No party in power can fire Dennis tomorrow because they don't have the power to fire him. Right?
Right.
So even if they
So things are being put in place for something else.
Just in case. So if it is that.
So that is so you're making a whole lot of assumption about the independence of the Public Service Commission, which we have outlined that by the Constitution. No, me can't sit down here beside you and make that statement.
No, I'm not making the statement. No, look at
15 seconds because we're out of time.
Listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what I'm saying.
I can't.
This is an hypothesis. Listen to what I'm saying. And this is a chess move, right? If it is that...
You can know that. I don't know that. I know what the Public Services Commission is by constitutional arrangement.
Public Services Commission aside.
I can't say Public Services Commission aside.
No, but it's a done deal. Is implied already.
The creature of the public, the way the Public Services Commission is required by constitutional arrangement to act
Nadeen, I'm just saying,
anti what you are saying.
Mama, but I'm saying it's a done deal. He's
what
employed.
Is a done deal?
Dennis is in the post already. You can't take him out. Who's going to take him out?
So as we end now, the government has insisted, that this was more about merit and process.
Yeah.
And you're arguing effectively that this was not enough, or this is not enough to calm the public, and that deeper changes are required. That's what I'm hearing.
But you do know that the government cannot make any changes to those arrangements.
It is in the post already. Constitutionally, they cannot remove him, just like how they can remove other positions. That permanent secretary is similar to a permanent secretary. You can't remove him.
Yeah.
So he's there already. You can't move him.
So
win, lose or draw, he's there.
Dr. Spence. Donovan. Thank you both. Thank you both.
You're welcome.
The conversation continues far beyond this studio. Parliament, in public, or in public discourse, and ultimately in how we shape governance in this country. Tonight's discussion reveals more than a single controversy. It shows a country wrestling with trust, process, power, and the conversation will keep asking the questions that matter. Join us next week, same time, same place, as we continue to hold institutions accountable and elevate voices across the region. I am Kwame Thomas. Good night.